Everybody, thank you very much and welcome to this Red Tail webinar, the first in a series we're planning over the Qantas centenary year. Most of you would know, my name is Rafael Toda, one of the four founders of the Red Tail Road to 100 initiative. As most of you know, Red Tail was formed 5 years ago, aimed at reuniting former staff from around the world to celebrate Qantas' centenary milestone, but equally to acknowledge our contribution to the airline's iconic status. Since the launching, our vision is shared by 2,545 former staff from around Australia and many parts of the world. Today, we're joined by Red Tail members from every state, Asia, the USA, and I would like to take particular recognition to those attending from the UK, Europe, and Saudi Arabia, where the time is currently between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. For the majority, Qantas instilled its unique culture in us, a culture that has remained well past our own careers in the airline. And this is evident today by the many who have remained associated through organizations like Red Tail and other Qantas social groups. Equally, my Red Tail co-founders, Brian Wild, Jim Eames, Max Hill, and our worldwide patron, John Fish, and I are very grateful to you, Alan, and your current Qantas management team for recognizing our Red Tail initiatives and for your support of our centenary celebration activities, starting with this webinar. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest. Alan Joyce has been Chief Executive Officer of the Qantas Group since 2008. During this time, he has overseen the biggest transformation of Qantas since the company was floated in the ASX in 1995 and has turned Qantas into one of the best performing airline groups in the world. Alan is currently a director of the Business Council of Australia, a member of the IATA Board of Governors, having served as chairman from 2012 to 2013, and a director of the Museum of Contemporary Arts Australia. Alan was also Jetstar's first CEO, as you'll all remember, between 2003 and 2008. And before that, he spent over 15 years in leadership positions in Qantas, Ansett, and Aer Lingus. At both Qantas and Ansett, he held network planning position. He led network planning, schedule planning, and network strategy functions. And he spent 8 years at Aer Lingus, where he held roles in sales, marketing, IT, network planning, operations research, revenue marketing, and fleet planning. Since the start of this year, Alan and his management team have been responding to a huge challenge posed by COVID-19, the biggest crisis that the global aviation industry has ever faced. I first met Alan in February of this year at the media launch of the centenary in-flight safety video. Well, things were really going well then, Alan. I was immediately impressed with his very approachable nature, and I welcome him today. So on behalf of the Foundation Committee and the Red Tail members from around the world, Alan, thank you so much for joining us today and for this fabulous opportunity to be able to hear from you.
Thanks, Ralph. And thanks for that introduction. And it's great to see so many friendly faces. I can see on the screen, I can already see a few people that I know, like Leslie Cassar, I've known for years, and Dean Gay, and a lot of others. So welcome, everybody. And I'm glad to be able to speak to you today.
All right. Well, a lot of people were obviously asking a lot of questions. So I'm going to lead off with a number of questions that were submitted by members, and time permitting, I'm also going to open the floor for more questions from the group. So Alan, as you know, it's been a big year. Everybody wants to know more about what's been happening. Firstly, with COVID and when it hit, and now with the borders opening. How's the airline planning to reopen?
Yeah, Ralph, I think it's been the toughest year I think we've seen in a long time. I'm sure we had tougher years during the Second World War and periods before that, but in modern times, this is the toughest period we've ever gone through, and the worst crisis I think the aviation industry has ever had. We have at the start of the year, it probably opened up for us having to deal with the bushfires, deal with the missiles in the Middle East. And we activated, even in January and February before COVID, our crisis management team had more activation than any other year in our history. And then COVID-19 hit. And we gradually then saw, and then very rapidly, a closure of all the borders. We had to ground 95% of our fleet, stand down 25,000 people to stop the bleeding and stop the cash burn. And we managed to do that. We managed to raise equity. We managed to secure debt against aircraft we bought with cash over the previous decade because the financial results were so strong. So we built up more liquidity than I think any airline relative to our size in the world had, which gave us a long runway to be able to recover from this. We were burning around $40 million a week in cash. That we believed with the equity we raised and with the debt we raised meant we could survive all the way to basically 2023. And then we decided that we also had to restructure the business because we do believe that like in previous crises, September the 11th or the global financial crisis, it will take years for demand to recover to pre-COVID levels. IATA forecasting it'll take till 2024 before we get back to 19 levels. We're more optimistic about domestic. We think domestic has huge pent-up demand. We don't think our domestic economy has been hit as much as the international economies. And we do think there'll be substitutions domestically for a while before the international borders open up. And our hope is that by Christmas, we can get back to somewhere between 50 to 65% of our pre-COVID schedule in the domestic market. That's dependent on Queensland opening up to New South Wales and Victoria. But when we do open up, we see massive demand on the routes where people can travel. When you could only travel intrastate, the number one route on our network was Brisbane-Cairns, Perth-Broome and Sydney-Ballina. And now we're seeing, even in the last week, as we opened up Melbourne, Sydney, it went from 45 flights a day down to one flight a day during COVID. In the last week, we've seen 40,000 people book tickets knowing that the border opens up on the 23rd of November. So we're growing back to 15 flights a day from then and hopefully can build it back to the 45. We think international is going to take a while to rebuild. It's going to need a vaccine, particularly for major markets like the United States and the UK. And that'll have to be effectively rolled out because I think the quarantine requirements to protect Australia mean demand is going to be so weak on them until an effective vaccine's there. But we are hoping in the interim that we might get more travel bubbles. And we have a one-way bubble with New Zealand. We're hoping that becomes both ways, particularly with the good progress that's been made in Victoria on the virus. That's, I think, the one thing that was stopping it. And hopefully we can get that before Christmas, if not slightly after. That opens up the biggest international market in volume into Australia after China. And then we're hopeful then other bubbles to Singapore, to Korea, to Taiwan, to Japan, where the virus is under control compared to the other jurisdictions, could happen in the early 2021 period. And we would start operating the destinations we haven't done for decades, like Taiwan and Korea, if there was an opportunity to operate under a bubble. It's then going to be a few years before we can recover international back to where it was, in line with the IATA forecast. That's why we're planning that the A380s will be in the desert for 3 years. We have parked them, all 12 of them, in the Mojave Desert. We will reactivate them. but they'll be the last aircraft probably put back in the air. And we are forecasting at this stage that won't be for 3 years.
That's just about answered every question I had.
I'm sure that's not right, true, Ralph.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you haven't. This isn't your first crisis, right? You've had the GFC, you've had QF-32, you've had the industrial dispute. Could you tell us whether any of these, or how any of these had prepared you a little bit better for this current one that you're facing right now?
Well, I think one of the great things about Qantas is that I think it performs its best in a crisis. General Cosgrove, who was on our board, actually said that he believed Qantas mobilizes faster than the defense forces at times, which is a great compliment. And I think Qantas is always the reason why we are the oldest continuous operating airline in the world, have survived for 100 years because of everybody that's on this call and the DNA that you built over the years into Qantas, which is to act fast, to adapt to the situation, and to change when needed. And we've done that for our entire history. So the first thing I think that I've learned over, and there's a great Theodore Roosevelt quote where he says, at the point of decision, the best thing to do is the right thing. The second best thing to do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing to do is nothing. And I believe that's the case. You make action. If it's the wrong, you find out afterwards, if it's the wrong decision, you quickly admit it, say it's wrong and repair it. And it's better to be proactive, take the actions that you think are needed. They say in Silicon Valley, it's called fail fast. So you get out there and adapt fast, but if it doesn't work, you know it fails and you move on and change it. And I think that's the one thing that stood Qantas in good stead. I started working in Qantas after leaving Ansett in 2000. And I was a year in Qantas before Ansett collapsed. And one of the things when we went back and looked at taking Ansett over for $1, what was very clear was the inaction that took place in Ansett over that period of time. It got caught in analysis paralysis, where Qantas was making really tough, really hard decisions and was doing it fast. And it got through September the 11th and the collapse of Ansett really well. And we have that philosophy. And when we got through this period of time, that's why we had to act fast. Unfortunately, on standing 25,000 people down. Unfortunately, on retiring the 747s early. Unfortunately, on making decisions about restructuring the business and making at least 6,000 people redundant, given what we were seeing. And unfortunately, it felt that we had to make decisions on a range of negotiations with suppliers, on a range of negotiations with travel agents, and making our position strong so we could build into the future. And I think the crisis over the years taught me to act fast, to try things. If they don't work, move on. They also told us that you think big. This is an opportunity to change things radically. And you have to change things radically when a step change like this occurs.
Thank you. These questions have partly been answered, but I'll go a bit granular on them. Qantas, everybody wants to know what Qantas will look like after the normal, when we're back to normal. Are there going to be any permanent changes? Are you going to introduce Sydney-London non-stop flights? Are you going to do them early to establish a leadership position? You already told us about your international routes, but what about the pandemic and how that's affected Project Sunrise, for example? And what does the future fleet composition look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we're still very positive on Project Sunrise. In fact, we had finalized the deal with Airbus for the A350, which was the aircraft, the A350-1000, which was the aircraft we had picked to do Sunrise in March. We're getting close to ordering it through the board. We had done a deal with the pilots. We had designed the product, a super duper new first class product, a new business class product. it was amazing looking, and it was fantastic, really set up for these super long haul travel. And as you know, we did 3 test flights.
Mm.
I was on 2 of them. I flew from London to Sydney non-stop, which is the start of our 100th birthday. And I flew from New York to Sydney non-stop, and they were amazing, and really got a great reaction from the world media, got great reaction from all the customers that were on it. And I think we're clearly going to be winners, and our business case was really strong. Of course, given what we're going through, we now have a period of time where we have to rebuild our balance sheet, because we have to make sure that we're out of the woods, that the world is looking better, and we're activating the aircraft we have. But we think we'll be one of the early movers on taking advantage of our relative strength, because we will have one of the best balance sheets of any airline. We'll have a domestic market that'll be a lot stronger than most of our competitors around the globe. And once we get through the period of when the vaccines rolled out, markets are being activated, I really want to revisit Project Sunrise. I think we want to do that. It'll take a number of years to get the aircraft and get ready for it. So it's not going to happen immediately. But we've always said that was an amazing business case. And I think if anything, post-COVID, the business case is going to be even stronger, because people will not want to go through hubs. They want to fly direct. And we think that that's really optimistic for us. And it's a unique value proposition that Qantas can do. In the interim, we have been taking delivery. We have taken delivery of 11 787s, and 3 brand new aircraft were built for us. They were due to come before COVID. Unfortunately, we haven't taken delivery of them yet, but they've been flown in Qantas colors, brand new, into the desert. They're stored in the desert. And once things are up and running, we'll activate them. And what we'd like to do is more of these super long flights that we already started. Perth London was the best route on our network before COVID-19 internationally. We think Perth Paris could work. We were going to start Brisbane to Chicago. We'd like to get back to do that. We were looking at Brisbane to other destinations in the United States, like Seattle was on our list. We wanted to look again at flying more into Dallas as well. We were growing San Francisco again with services from Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and the 787 made them economic. So we'd like a lot more into the States, and with having the capability of these aircraft is really good. And a fun fact, the guys got approval for 330-minute ETOPS on the aircraft, even in lockdown. So we flew a Joburg flight with 330-minute ETOPS, only the 3rd airline in the world to do that at that level. And it's to Joburg and back. So we know we can use this aircraft effectively to Africa and to South America as well now with those approvals. And that quietly happened during COVID lockdown. So the opportunity with the 787 is unbelievably good in the build up to Sunrise. And one last thing on fleet, we have to do a competition for the domestic fleet, because the 737s are going to have to be replaced in the next decade for Qantas. Jetstar has ordered the Neos, and we were supposed to have some of them coming this year as well. They're in storage until we're ready to take them, a brand new aircraft. And we want to do a competition, which could be for 100 to 200 domestic aircraft in the next year to 18 months. And now is a good time, I think, to do that competition. I think we'll get a great price for the aircraft. It's for the next 20 years, 30 years of aircraft arrivals. And Qantas, I think, will be confident enough and strong enough to be out there as one of the first big airlines to put in a big aircraft order for its fleet replacement over the next couple of decades.
Thank you. That actually leads in nicely to my next question, which you've already partly answered. But considering the state of the pandemic in the Americas and the U.S. carriers continuing to fly, you've given us an overview of what you think you'd like to do for the U.S. With all the ports that you mentioned. But do you have any idea when that could happen, considering the pandemic situation that there is at the moment over there?
Yeah, it's scary the numbers that are happening in the States, well
Mm,
over 100,000 cases,
mm,
Raf. And I think it really is now dependent on a vaccine. So we've been assuming that we won't have US operations starting again, probably until the earliest at the end of 21, because I think people are saying it will take a while for the vaccine to roll out, and we'll have to have that confidence. There's a lot of work going on at the moment on um, how we'd have a vaccine passport equivalent of.
yes.
Do you remember the WHO yellow
Yes.
books? Yeah. So an electronic version of that, IATA and the governments are working on it. So, and we'll probably change our terms and conditions. So you'd have to be vaccinated before you can get on our aircraft. And I think we're going to have some changes of rules like that going forward. But it's going to be dependent on the vaccine. The good news of the Pfizer vaccine this week, and we think in the next few weeks, there's more results of the various studies of different vaccines, is that the effectiveness of the vaccine at 90% says that is a solution for us to get services back to the United States, to the UK, back up and running, and to get this virus under control. And we're hopeful that the other vaccines will have equally good results. But I think we're dependent for Europe and for North America on the rollout of the vaccine before we'd have any substantial services there.
Yeah.
We've got some good partnership things changing. American Airlines are a very strong partner for us, but we now have Alaskan Airlines that were also a partner joining One World. That's been quietly happening in the background. And we're very close to Alaskan. They have a big hub, as you know, in Seattle and in San Francisco. They took over Virgin America. So we think our strength in San Francisco and Seattle, as well as LA, and Dallas and Chicago, could continue to grow. So we're very optimistic about the US market in the long run, but it is going to take us getting the vaccine through before we could reestablish any significant services there.
Let's move into the domestic side of things and, talk a little bit about your competition. What do you think the domestic market will look like considering Virgin's plans to return to a hybrid budget airline?
Yeah, a good question. I think where we're seeing it, and we're reading the newspapers like everybody else, and I think there's a little bit of confusion from the Virgin side of what they want to be, but we're sort of coming to the conclusion, and I believe there's a big announcement next week from the new owners. They've gotten the keys to the business now about exactly what they're planning. For our belief, it is that hybrid model, somewhere between a low cost and a full service airline. It's what Brett Godfrey used to run very profitably for 10 years,
That's right.
very profitably. And then a change model. I mean, I think that shows you the success of Qantas over the last 2 decades. Virgin should have eaten Qantas's lunch domestically, because they were a low cost carrier with a cost base 40% below Qantas's. Every low cost carrier in the world really put the full service carrier under immense pressure. Ryanair, EasyJet with British Airways and Lufthansa, Southwest with the American carriers, and they all struggled to compete against them. Qantas created Jetstar. Jetstar was really effective against Virgin, got a lower cost base than Virgin. Virgin decided to move up market to compete against Qantas and gave the low cost space to Jetstar. Jetstar became very profitable. Virgin then failed at the top end. 80% of the corporate market was with Qantas, stayed with Qantas, and they went bankrupt because of a failed business strategy and 10 years of losing money and for being badly managed. And now we're in a position where they've got good, aggressive owners. They're going to come out leaner and meaner out of administration. That means we have to be at the top of our game. That means we have to take this $1 billion in costs out, we believe, to make sure we don't lose a competitive advantage. And we think our strategy is still the right one. We invest in product and service for Qantas. We keep on investing in that product and service and get a premium at the top end of the market. And we make sure that Jetstar is the lowest cost operator in the market and operating the lower airfares. We think our market share, because Virgin are handing back the A330s, the ATRs, the Embraers, and a large chunk of the 737s. Our market share will go to over 70% naturally anyway, without us doing anything. And we think there are opportunities on both ends of the market. Jetstar can take market share because Tiger is closing down, and Qantas will take market share at the corporate end because Virgin won't have the product to be able to compete against it. So we're quite comfortable with where we are, but we think we're going to have to be at the top of our game to compete with a well-managed Virgin. I know Jane very well. She's going to do a good job there, I think. And we know Bain are going to be very aggressive. So we're going to be at the top of our game to be able to compete with that.
Okay. At this point, I think I'll open the questions to some of the members that have forwarded some questions that I'd want them to ask it themselves. I'd like to get Max Ellerman if he's on the. Max, are you around? Yep, you are. If you just unmute yourself, Max is going to ask about the 787s.
Hey, Max. We can't hear you, Max.
Max, you're on. Yep, there you go.
Hi. Hello, Alan. Max Ellerman in Brisbane. How are you?
Hey, Max.
Thanks for your time today. I was just wondering, with what you've just been talking about in the competition in the domestic market, is there a plan to introduce the 787s that aren't flying internationally into the domestic market as an interim measure until we get back to flying internationally?
So at the moment, we're using the A330s in the domestic market like we were before COVID-19 because we're set up in more ports with the A330s and we're using them for freight capability. Australia Post have, as you can imagine, where everybody locked at home, have had a surge in parcels and we've got freight going through the roof. It's actually performing really well. We parked a lot of the Qantas 787s in the Mojave Desert, but we have a few of them we're using for repatriation flights. There's one of them, I think, leaving London again tonight. We had a Joburg one, as I mentioned, and we think we'll use them for that. We are looking at some possibilities of maybe, if the demand is strong enough, using Jetstar 787s domestically, because Jetstar may need more aircraft capacity. But the Qantas ones, we're really focusing on using them still internationally on the long sectors. They've got not many seats on them. There's 236 seats on the 787. They're set up for very long flights. So the 330s actually are more economical flying domestically because the 787 is like smashing a nut with the sledgehammer. It's very capable and very big. Jetstar's ones are a bit better. They're 787-8s. They have a lot more seats on them, so they could work effectively domestically, but we're still working through the economics of
that. The next question I'd like to offer to Bev Cohen, who a former flight hostie from New South Wales. She wants to talk about the travel industry at large. Bev, are you around? Bev, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was having problems unmuting. Thank you for that. And thank you, Alan, for addressing us. As Raphael said, I'm part of the Qantas Hostess Club, and that's how our membership for Red Tail. I also own Wentworth Travel, which is down in Double Bay, and we've been working with Qantas and your wonderful, amazing Katie Norton with some initiatives at the moment. So you can say thank you to her from me.
I will, that's good.
She's been amazing. But what my question is will the new Qantas be able to work with us as travel agents and we be remunerated and that's given a commission to work together? At the moment, there's a lot of direct marketing from Qantas, which is a little bit scary to us.
Yeah.
But we know that the distribution system through agents is a lot more effective financially for you, and we're hoping that's the way you will go, and that you could let us know which way you do think that you will go, because we would like to work with you because we also feel your pain. We're down 95% in sales. So we understand what you're going through, and you can understand what we're going through.
Yeah, Bev, and we see a very important role for the travel agents, and the relationship for us is going to be very important going forward. We think things are changing, and we're having to adapt with that. So we are using technology a lot better, and as you mentioned, the Qantas distribution channel, we were doing that and investing heavily in that before COVID-19 to improve the links and the content that we can get out to travel agents. And I think that's going to be a big improvement for you and the rest of the trade. We think there'll be a lot more offers we can give that we couldn't do before through GDSs. And we think that's going to be a very positive thing that you guys get involved in. And even now, we've agreed to put investments of millions of dollars into that technology, which I think will be helpful. And we are talking through with the big chains at the moment. We're talking to Flight Centre, CTM, and Hello World about what the agreements and the relationships will be going forward. We regard them as very important. We are making really good progress with them, and as we get them to a close, it'll bring more certainty about what those future arrangements look like. But of course, everything that we are doing has to change in some aspects of it. The focus is going to be different. I think in the next year, it's going to be more domestic than international, but international is going to come back, and we need to work with the agents. We want to work with the agents, and we think it's a very important relationship. So there's no change for us focusing on direct distribution as a strategy. We want to have an indirect channel. We want to be open on indirect channels, but it has to change in how it was done in the past.
Thank you. Yes, we're part of the CT partners, so.
Oh, are you? So yeah. I think we, in the next few weeks, we'll hopefully have arrangements that are very clear to everybody. I think we're getting very close to finalising everything.
Terrific. No, that's great. If we know that, and we can all work together, which will help us all, which is great. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bev.
The next question that I'd like to get Chris Sherwood on the line now from Western Australia. And his background with Qantas was in sales, traffic, and freight. And he has a question for you on the centenary celebrations.
Hey, Chris.
Good morning, Alan, and greetings from the Wild West. Yeah. Thank you very much, firstly, for your lucid explanation and your valuable time this morning. And the question I have for you is this. We're in a very historic year, and we're very proud of that, all red tailers and many Australians around the world. In view of the impact of the pandemic, Alan, what events is Qantas planning to celebrate for the 100th anniversary during the coming year? And are you continuing to have the historic roadshow visit the different states as part of this? Bearing in mind that you have a cohort of red tail volunteers ready, willing, and able to assist you in this.
Yeah, Chris. So obviously on Monday it's kick-starts, and we're going to be doing a town hall, which has it's obviously a lot more limited than we had planned because of COVID-19, which has a lot of messages from a lot of people around the partnerships we've had, people we've worked with. We've got a video that takes us through the 100-year history. We've got a lot of content that we'll be sharing. I think we're starting to share it from Friday, which is good. And we had to do it at no cost. And what's great is we've been been able to do this self-funded. We have the museum ready and up and ready and willing to go. It's fantastic. I've seen the work that's been done on it. But of course, because of COVID-19, there wasn't a time to run it. So once we get around and those restrictions have been eliminated around the country, our intent is to still do the museum tour throughout the year. And of course, we can keep on going well into 21, into 22 if we have to, because as far as we're concerned, our birthday doesn't end until the 15th of November, 2021. and we may be able to do a lot more towards the end of 21. And we're very, very pleased that we've had so many volunteers, and we'd like you guys to be out there talking about the history and promoting that history when that goes around the country. We have a book that's coming out, so other bits and pieces, which is the 100 years. That's available. I think you can buy in Dimox. We have out there, and not many people are touching coins at the moment, but there's 5 million coins with the Qantas 100-year logo on it. Australia Post are doing a stamp which celebrates the 100 years. And we're donating a few things to the Founders Museum in Longreach, which will make I believe it's spectacular. I haven't been able to get there because of the ban on traveling, but they've got a light show in the Founders Museum in Longreach. And one of the things we were going to do, should have happened by now, was a charter for you guys from a couple of places to get to Longreach. And we'll be doing that next year when we can.
Right.
To be able to see that amazing light show and that amazing museum with some of the history that's there. So hopefully things will get delayed a bit, and they'll all happen during the year. That's our plan.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Thanks, Chris.
The next question is from Carolyn Stalbo, former crew resource planner from Queensland, and she has a personal question.
Hello, Carolyn.
Hi, Alan. Good morning. Thanks for addressing us. I just wanted to say you must be always under relentless pressure, and I'd like you to help tell us how you manage to keep so calm and sane in this crazy world right now.
Thanks, Carolyn. Well, one of the things I was probably lucky in Aer Lingus when I started my career is that they're probably ahead of their time, that they invested a lot in training about mindfulness. And one of the things that does help me get through it is that training, and I keep on focusing in on it. So people that do it is just calming your mind a bit more. People do yoga or other mindfulness training that does help with breathing and focusing in on the issue that you're dealing with, and then focusing on those issues. And so when I go home, I try absolutely to stop thinking about work, thinking about my husband, watching a TV show, reading a book, and switching off. And I can do that quite effectively by compartmentalizing. You're always on call. You can get a call that can disrupt that, but that is manageable, and it helps me manage it. And then the other thing I find is that you have to have really good people around you to manage through these things. And we have an amazing group of people in Qantas, and you have really good people. You don't get challenged by them. You always have to act humble, I believe, is my view, because and the way I try and make decisions is I form a hypothesis, an answer, and that's my scientific background. And then you have to be open for people challenging you, because they either prove or disprove it with information. So I'm in the boardroom at the moment. We have great debates in here with the senior management team, and you get better answers, and then you get better people around you because you're continually asking questions, trying to find information. And our best leaders, I think, are the humble people that you get around you. And a lot of our team are like that. And that takes a lot of stress out when you've got people like that, willing to debate, willing to argue, willing to come to a conclusion, come to a consensus. And you just see really capable people that you trust, believe that they can get on and do the job. And then my job, I believe, excuse the airline analogy, is to operate at 35,000 feet. So you're trying to take a view of everything. And if you're down at 5 feet, I mean, Ralph went through a lot of the jobs I did, like a lot of you guys did. You know, I love doing schedules planning. That's my core skill. But if I'm doing schedules planning and looking at what routes we should fly or what fleet we should fly, then I'm not doing my job. And there's plenty of really good people in Qantas that does that. And giving them the ability and authority to do it also helps you get through this as well. And I'm not one of these believers. There's a macho culture in some organizations that executives should work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not take any holidays. We believe in the opposite. People should take their leave, and you get a lot more productivity out of people when they come back from 2 weeks leave. And I enforce everybody to take their leave because it does let people refresh. They come back a lot more productive and it gets the job done faster. And I do lead by example. So my brother's coming up with his family from Melbourne at Christmas. We're closing all of GMC, all of my team are not going to be in here from the middle of December to the middle of January. And that's great. Everybody will come back into the new year refreshed. So that helps manage the stress and it keeps everybody calm as well.
Wonderful. Let me know when you want to book a cruise. I do interline discounts.
And on that note, it's a perfect segue for Max Hill, who is the last question we've got before we open it to the floor.
Hey,
Max. You're on mute, Max. You're on mute, Max.
All right.
Yep, there you go.
Right, Alan, good morning. And again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. My question, most Qantas retirees have an expiry date on when their staff travel benefits will cease. Due to COVID and no staff travel being utilised, will the company look at extending their expiry date by at least 12 months?
So I think we've already announced that anybody that had an expiry between March and June of next year will get an extra year added on to the staff travel. And we're going to have to keep an eye on what actually happens. So Max, a lot depends on when we think international borders will open up and domestic borders will open up. But at this stage, that's as far as we're going, but we're going to keep an eye on this into next year and see whether people are still limited and there's still significant issues with people using staff travel. And we'll review it at that stage.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Raf.
Thank you very much. Look, we're, from all the questions that were submitted, pretty much everyone is, every question has been responded to. I have a bit of time left, maybe about 5-10 minutes, to open it to the floor. Does anybody want to ask a question? You raise your hand and I can then try and find you in this 3 pages that we've got of people, which is very encouraging.
Rafa, Charles Wade.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
Or Charlie Wade. Can I have just one quick word with Alan, Joyce?
Sure. Charles is our patron for the ACT.
Canberra.
Hey, Charles.
Alan, I'll just very briefly congratulate you. You have a really tough choice. What I was told, something you may not know, in my last function in Qantas in Consumer Affairs, that Qantas was the first airline or the founder of business class. What happened, heads of companies used to go first class and the deputy had to travel in economy. And I received many complaints from these people that they're in economy trying to work and they're surrounded by children and all sorts of things. So we arranged with reservations that when you made a booking to say that you were travelling on business but you're in economy, could they be seated in the front 2 rows? And then we arranged that a curtain be put behind those 2 rows and we called it the quiet zone. It was so successful that I'm talking of a few years ago, we thought we'll make it a bit more fancy. And it became business class, and that was the start of business class worldwide. And Qantas was the reason for it. I don't know whether you knew that or not.
I did, Charles. I didn't know your role in it, but it's something that we're pretty proud of. And I think from Monday, when we're talking about some of the history, is one of the things we use as an example of the innovation that Qantas led. Yeah. You know, I usually go through every decade and I say, like in the 1920s, we built our own aircraft, one of the few airlines to do. In the 30s, we became an international airline. In the 40s, we did double sunrise flights. In the 50s, the first to get a jet aircraft. In the 60s, going around the world in both directions. In the 70s, the one I used was we created business class, and we still have the record of the most amount of people on a 747 after Cyclone Tracy. So it's a very important part of our history. So well done on doing that.
And just one other quick question: the old 747s in the desert.
Yes.
Do we still own them?
Yeah, we do. We actually sold the last 6 of them. The GE 747 400 ERs. They've been sold back to General Electric because the engines were worth
the engines we went.
Yeah, so the whole aircraft went, and they bought them, got a good price out of them before the COVID happened. But the Rolls-Royce ones, all those aircraft are in the Mojave Desert as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, and congratulations. You've got a tough job.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I'll have to say, one of the saddest things, just talking about the desert, I mentioned that the 12 A380s are in the desert. We had 6 of them reconfigured with the new product. If you've probably been on them, the new product is superb.
Yeah.
And one brand new one, which was done in Dresden, had to fly directly from Germany with the seats never being sit in, directly into the desert, and sitting in the desert now. That's heartbreaking.
It's cruel.
It's cruel. Yeah.
Anyway, good luck for the future.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Maybe one more question. Okay, well, maybe I'll ask the question then. Alan, you mentioned that all our aircraft are going to the desert. Is there any reason why they didn't go to our desert?
Yeah, Ralph. So it's a good question. So our engineers are of the view that going to, and I think there's a lot in Alice Springs that Singapore Airways have, that it's too humid there in certain parts of the year. Because we're leaving the A380s in the desert for 3 years, they're better in Mojave, which is drier heat. The other big difference is that we have a big hangar, as you're probably aware, in LA, only A380 hangar in North America. And a lot of our A380 maintenance was done in LA because the aircraft arrived in the morning and didn't go till the evening. So we have a couple of hundred engineers in Los Angeles that are certified on the 380s and the 78s. And it's only a 2-hour drive from LA to get to Mojave. So the engineers can go up and continually do maintenance on the 380s and the 78s, where Alice is a lot harder to get to, and there's nobody close enough that has A380 or 787 licenses like they have in LA. And when they come out of the desert, it's a short hop from Mojave into LA because some major maintenance will have to be done on the aircraft before they're flown home. And that hangar is capable of doing them there. With Alice, it's a very long flight to get them back to a hangar where you can do the significant maintenance. So it made a lot more sense to do them in Mojave. I should say also, I don't know if you know the history, Victorville is also the home of where the US does all of its drone activity around the world. And that's where the aircraft are stored. So it's actually quite a secure facility. So it's very safe to have the aircraft there in Victorville, which is where our aircraft are.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our Red Tail webinar with Qantas CEO Alan Joyce. Before I hand over to Alan, I'd like to acknowledge also the presence of Alastair Fish, who's in our group today, representing his father, John. So thank you for making it, Alastair. Appreciate it. And also, I want to acknowledge the organizers that helped me with this webinar. This couldn't just have happened between Alan and I. There are a lot of people behind this, and it starts with Ken Groves, who's with us today. So Ken, thank you very much for your help. Stephanie Tully from Qantas Public Affairs. Henry Budd, who has been invaluable to this organizing this Zoom meeting and all the rest of it. And also to Sally, your PA, Alan, for all the toing and froing and follow-ups that she's made. So appreciate everybody's help. So on behalf of our members attending today and the many that will hear this recording in the future, thank you for your time to address us on the eve of the airline centenary. We wish you and your management team success for the future. as you lead Australia's aviation recovery. And now I would like to offer you the floor for final remarks.
Thanks, Ralph, and thank you very much for those kind words and for facilitating that, and for everybody that helped in pulling this together. It's great to see so many friendly faces, as I said. Seeing, I didn't know Ken's on it. I thought he was on holiday somewhere. He's obviously dialing in from a beach. And Les and Ian, and to so many people I see here that you recognize are just great. And can I say, you know, I know it's a very tough period for everybody out there, and it's a tough period. Obviously, a lot of people here are involved in other businesses as well. But I'm fundamentally optimistic about our future. I think Qantas is well set up to survive this crisis, and I think Qantas is one of the best positioned airlines in the world. And I want to thank everybody for the decades of contribution that you've made to Qantas. It's very clear that we're in this position because of the great people over the decades, but for the hard work that you guys did, the hard work that you've put into this airline and getting it to the position. It is clearly the most iconic brand in Australia. It's seen around the world as an Australian icon. It's seen around the world because of its innovation. You know, we talked of every decade the company reinventing itself. And a lot of people look to Qantas as one of the leading airlines on the globe. A lot of people look to Qantas as the airline that challenges the status quo and does things differently. And it's thanks to your contribution over the 100 years that we're here. I kind of say, you know, I take this job as a view, I'm the custodian of this great brand. I want to leave in a better position than I found it. We have repair to do over the next 3 years. We've got a great team managing it. I think it's in very safe hands, and we will get it through this crisis and positioned to thrive and survive in the future. And thank you for joining us on celebrating a muted 100th birthday, but hopefully the celebrations become a lot bigger during this year, and we get to see you at a few more events during the year. And again, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ralph.